Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are using the Johnson edition, and we turn now to poem 351, the first line of this one. I felt my life with both my hands. Can we just say out loud, oh, what an amazing first line. And I mean, this poem is immediately going to reach out and grab us with a word image like this. Like, what is that about? Well, this is another crisis poem, as we've referenced it already. But it isn't sure what it is about that is causing the crisis for Emily. The possibility of death, we've seen that a number of times in already these poems we've been studying, or possibly the death of a relationship. Maybe some have speculated, even Sam Boyle, some have speculated that Emily wrote this poem after she had to come to terms with the fact that she would never be with Sam Boyles in any kind of romantic way. Now our assumptions, speaking of Sam Boyles, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. And I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of previous introductory comments as well as our previous 350 poems. We just finished with 350. They leave us with the infinite. Now, if you did that introductory set of comments with us, you know that we talk about in Room 303 our big five. What does this text say about epistemology, what you can know, ontology, who you are, and that's going to be a big one for this poem. Psychology, the study of the individual mind. Sociology, the study of the collective or group mind. And then finally that question of theodicy. Why must there be pain and suffering in the world? Why did this happen for me instead of why did this happen to me? Now again, the question is, what was the trial or the challenge that led to this poem that has somehow changed Emily fundamentally, changed her so much that she's not even sure she can anymore recognize herself. Now, we have said that Emily is one of the early integral thinkers. That is to say, she understands the concept of transcend and include. We move on to the next stage of development. We bring with us some of what we had from before, but much of what we had before we leave, we transcend it. Note the power of self-dialogue here. We called our series Chats with Emily for a poem just like this. That is to say, self-introspection. Many have read this as a soliloquy of a kind. I felt my life with both my hands to see if it was there. I held my spirit to the glass to prove it possibler. I turned my being round and paused at every pound to ask the owner's name for doubt that I should know the sound. I judged my features, jarred my hair. I pushed my dimples by and waited if they twinkled back. Conviction might of me. I told myself, take courage, friend. That was a former time, but we might learn to like the heaven as well as our old home. Do note that the poem ends with quotation marks and obviously an exclamation point. The power of the first line is, of course, it isn't exactly clear what she means when she says, I felt my life with both my hands. And of course, what we're reading here is, I had to take a look at my life. I had to take a look at who I am. You'll remember the Delphi Oracle, Know Thyself. And I think that stands behind a whole lot of what's going on here. I think there's a lot of Plato or Socrates standing behind this. In other words, there comes moments in our life when we will begin to ask the simple question, who am I? Or what have I now become? And how is that quite different from anything that came before? And to do that, we have to look at ourselves. So notice, the quest is to see if it was there. Notice it's not I was there, but it was there. That is to say, the life. Now that's why some of the readers of this poem have read, Emily has died and has gone to heaven, and she's not sure now who or what she is. Some obviously see this as more like stage development model, if you will. Notice she says, I held my spirit to the glass. Notice not her body. So for Emily, she's not interested in looking at herself in a mirror physically, but rather spiritually. But then notice how she goes on to talk in very physical language about dimples and the like, her hair and the like, to prove it possibler. By the way, possibler only used one time in all of her poetry, and it's here. I turned, and here's your ontological note, I turned my being round and round. It's as if she's holding up herself to herself, and she's kind of turning it around, right? And paused at every pound. Rarely, we've seen this, right? Rarely does she do this, where she has so clear kinds of rhymes to ask. In other words, while I was doing this, I was asking the owner's name. In other words, it's this ability, and Emily is this amazing poet who can do this. She literally can step outside of herself and ask, who are you? Speaking directly to herself. And then she says to ask the owner's name for doubt that I should know the sound. She says, I don't even know that I would recognize anymore who I am. So many readers of this poem have identified with what exactly she's doing, the game, if we can call it that, a self-introspection game that she is playing. She continues, I judge my features. Notice she starts with spiritual, but she's talking now about her features, her face. Jarred my hair means, by the way, the only time she used the word jar in all her poetry is here. Shuffles her hair or shakes her hair out. I pushed my dimples by. In 6 different poems she references dimples. And waited. If they twinkled back, conviction might of me. In other words, I had to figure out, am I still the same me? Now, we've all had this experience of looking at ourselves in a mirror when we were children, and she's saying, I had to look at myself for a long time to see if I could recognize who I was. And then finally, the dialogue with herself. Chats with Emily, our playlist, of course, is what we're calling this. I told myself, quote, take courage, friend. Notice friend capitalized, notice courage capitalized. That was a former time. Notice not place, time. But we, notice again, speaking now to yourself makes it plural, might learn to like, notice it's not this heaven, it's the heaven, as well as our old home, exclamation mark. Well, what exactly is it she's arguing in this poem? I think there are moments in our life, she says, when we come and we have to find ourselves again, and we have to ask some very profound questions. I'm hopeful this is already happening for you, to jump to 3B for just a moment, that already your reading of this poetry is challenging you to ask simple questions like, who am I really? That is to say, all of our life, we struggle, and we have to find ways to transcend and include. In that regards as well, now to go to 2B, I love the fact that she invents a word like possible and only uses it once here. Think about the challenge as well of all the alliteration that happens in this poem, right? Prove, possibler, paused, pound, judged, jarred, told, take, friend, former, learn, like, heaven, home. It's brilliant the way she's playing the sound game in this poem. At 3A, think about our study of Sylvia Plath's classic poem, Mirror. We've given full lectures on it at learnstrong.net. Go back and study the way in which that poem is informed by a poem like this. Think about Pope's essay on man, presume not God to scan, the only study of mankind is man. We've given full lectures on that set of lines as well. The challenge, of course, is to look at oneself. Think about what Dante is doing in the Divine Commedia when he meets himself. We have Dante, the writer of the poem, and then Dante, the pilgrim, in the poem, right? Finally, at 3B, to own a poem like this, what was a time that you had to do this very thing? That you had to see yourself in the mirror, in the emotive or spiritual mirror, and you had to transcend and include, and you had to leave it and get on with your life. Thank you.